Yo! All right, so I've got the Canon R6 V with me here today, and these are my exact settings that I use for this camera. I've shot a few weddings with this, and you guys have been asking me to make this video. These are the exact settings that I use for this camera. Basically, I'm gonna go over everything. Keep in mind though, if I bypass something or if I skip over something, it just means that I leave that at its factory settings, kind of like when you get it out of the box. I don't change it. I just leave it how it is. All right, so let's do this. Let's get started. In today's video, no nonsense. That's what this channel is all about. So if you like that kind of stuff, subscribe so you don't miss out on these videos. Let's go. I'm actually gonna go over the first thing, which is the LCD screen and everything that you're greeted with right away on the screen. Because you can really quickly go through all your settings right there on the screen if you know how to use it. And if you press on the info right there, you'll be able to cycle through all the information. Now, obviously, the rest of the video, it will dictate on how that will look and the customizing of like everything on that LCD screen. So you're gonna wanna watch the whole video so that way you can really customize the LCD screen and what you want it to look like. So when you have your camera and you go to the info, the main things will come up. You'll have your shutter speed right there at the bottom left. You'll have your f-stop right there, right next to it. And then you'll have your ISO and what ISO settings that you've chosen. Now, just to go over some of the ISO settings that I choose to set them and register them to 100, 800, and 6400 because those are the base ISOs. So for an example, in a situation like this where I can control all the lighting, I'm gonna leave the camera on ISO 100 because you're not gonna get any grain at all, zero grain. But this camera is actually really good in low light. So when you put it on 800, you can pretty much see no grain. And then when you go over to 6400, you can pretty much see no grain at that either. You want to stick to those two ISOs. Don't go back to like 5000 or when you're at 800 going up to 1600 because it's going to look more grainy. Dedicate and stick to 800 or 6400. Trust me, it's the most cleanest ISO and you're gonna get the least amount of grain. The top right there is your Kelvin temperature. You can choose to change your Kelvin temperature to warm or cool from there. And then the next one obviously is the record button, a big red record button. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then the top right is your formats. So basically you can quickly go in there and change to 30 frames, 60 frames. And I really like this because this is very similar to the cinema menu, and I love this. You can quickly go in there and be like, okay, I want XFAVC, I want 10-bit, I want 60 frames, 30 frames, rather than going into your settings, into your camera. It's quickly right there, so you can basically control everything from right there. Now, if you press on the info again, more stuff is gonna come up, and it's gonna kind of like clutter your screen, so I don't really like that. I actually leave mine on the first info. And if you press on the info again, more stuff will come up like the RGB, like the waveforms and stuff like that. And it's just overbearing with a lot of information there. And while I'm shooting, I don't like seeing all that. But there are a lot of times I'll scroll with this and I'll turn it on, I'll turn it off. But the basic ones that I use is just the info one, and it just gives you the basic information. And I forgot to say that the top left there is like your manual. So again, I always put mine on manual because I'll be able to control everything. And the top left there as well is how much time you have to record in the current settings that you have your camera. Once you change your settings, it will dictate how much time you have for your SD card. You'll see over on the top left there, right next to where your mode is, like your manual, it will say MF for like, manual or autofocus, whatever you have your camera in. And the one underneath it is the SD card or CF Express card. It will say 1 or 2, which is basically the playback. So when you press the bottom left, the play button, you'll be able to know, okay, it's playing from that card, whether it's 1 or 2, whatever one you have yours set on. And underneath that is basically the frame rates and the stuff that you've chosen. Again, I don't use that particular info settings because I think it's too cluttered. Plus it's very, very tiny and it's hard for me to see. So I don't really ever use that. And then you'll have the volume rocker right there on the bottom left. That's important to me. So sometimes I'll scroll through these and I'll choose to do kind of what I want with the info there. While you're on shoot, if you have your camera set up the way that you like, you should be able to just be on the shoot, on the day of the shoot, wedding, whatever you're filming, and control everything right on the LCD screen there, so you're not wasting time. So the first thing that we're greeted with in this camera is the red menu, and a lot is gonna be talked about just in the red menu here. Basically all the tabs, we're gonna customize all these tabs. So just to go ahead and show you exactly what I use, I basically always leave it on long op because I can dual card record. It is very important for me to dual card record. The only time, and I'll go over this, the only time I will shoot open gate or like 7K or something like that is if I'm filming like a YouTube video and I'm not doing client work that's paying me thousands of dollars to do their content for them. I always dual card record whenever I'm dealing with a wedding or any client work because I want that backup. So me, pretty much all the time, I leave it on long op because I can then choose from 24 frames per second, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second, and it will always dual card record. But for those that might want to shoot open gate so you can get the full sensor and you can shoot 7K, all you have to do is go to XFH EVCS, and as soon as you click on that, you'll be able to see that the open gate option will show up, and you can go ahead and turn on open gate. So now when you're recording, you're going to be recording the full width of the sensor. But again, once you do that, your camera will let you know that, hey, you can't dual card record, and there's some functions that you have selected that you cannot do. So let me show you. If you go to the wrench menu, so let's scroll all the way over there. In the first tab, you'll see the record, and if you go down, it will say standard because you will not be able to do dual card record, and it's going to go to the first card, which is the CF Express card, because the CF Express card is the only card that can handle that open gate 7K. SD cards can't do that. And another reason why I personally don't like to shoot open gate is because, let's say if I were to crop into this and only have these lines here, the framing is not right. So for this video, you can see what I have over here. I've set this up and you can see my light over there. I've set the framing up to look like this. But if I were to crop in right now, you would not see this framing. So that's why I don't really like open gate, because again, I want to really control what my viewers see. So if I'm going to do vertical content, I'm turning my camera around and I'm putting these things closer so they're in the actual shot. That's why I don't really like the lazy kind of mentality. Shoot once and then you're golden and you got social media. Just take your time, film it vertically, film it horizontal, take your time, script it out, and just work hard. Now, I'm not denying that this is very beneficial for those that can only shoot one take on something. It's better to have the options than to not have it at all. But if we go back, I'm gonna turn off open gate, like I said, because this whole video is about the settings that I use. So if you're gonna follow what I use and you see this channel, and you like the image that comes out of this, this is basically the exact settings that I use. So once again, I'm gonna go over to the movie record format and I'm gonna choose XF AVC-S 422 10-bit. That's what I choose. That's basically always what I shoot 100% of the time. If you're a little bit confused, the first option there is going to be whether or not you wanna shoot 4K, 2K, 7K. This camera also offers, if you're shooting in open gate, that is. So that's the first option of the movie record size. And then the middle is always your frame rates. And then the far right is either long op or intro frame, IPP, or all I. But keep in mind, when you go up to intro frame, you'll see that it will say something like 600 megabytes per second. That's why I go to the IPB, because it's 250 megabytes per second, because if I were to show you my SD cards, and I'm using V90 SD cards, which are basically the best SD cards on the market because they have the 300 megabytes per second. So keep that in mind while shooting with this camera. So if you have an SD card and it's a V60 and it only has 150 megabytes per second, you're not even going to be able to shoot this because the camera says right there 250 megabytes per second if you're shooting long op at 60 frames, that is. Once you go over to the 30 frames, it will go down to 150. And then if you go down to 24 frames, it actually does still stay at 150 megabytes per second. Anyway, moving on. That was a long one to go over. Going on to the second tab. This one's really quick. Going over to the sound recording. Obviously, I see no reason to choose 16-bit. I will choose the 24-bit. That's what I have it on. And if you go over to the audio settings, I have it on built-in microphone because I only want the scratch audio from this camera because I'm always filming with something like this, so it doesn't sound something like this. This is what the scratch audio sounds like, and this is what the professional mic sounds like. And I'm always connected to a DJ soundboard, or I have some mic like this. So what I'll always do is I'll put on the scratch audio mic on these cameras because, again, I have professional audio. Moving on to the third tab, this is what I have set into the third tab. I'll leave basically everything how it is except for the anti-flickering. If I go to venues and there's certain weird lighting and you see those like lines going up and down the screen, there's two ways to go about fixing this. You can choose, some cameras don't have this, but the R6 V does have this, so this is really good. You can go ahead and turn that on or off, and that will help with the flickering. If you know what I'm talking about, you get those weird lines. Another way around this is to basically change your shutter speed. When you change your shutter speed, it sometimes will get rid of, like, it won't really completely get rid of it, but it will definitely, like, make it less, noticeable. The fourth tab we're going to spend a little bit of time in, and this is because this is what I shoot all the time. There's nothing else I shoot on this camera. I'm always shooting in C-Log 2 because that's the best dynamic range out of the camera. So once you're in the fourth tab, if you go to the first one, which is the color mode, you'll see the picture, you'll see the custom picture, and you'll have color filter, and you'll have picture style. Now what I choose, like I said, is I go over to the custom picture. Once you are just on that custom picture, go to the bottom left, you'll see where it says info change. And once you click on the info change, you can then choose what you want. I've selected the Canon Log 2. I haven't selected the Rec 709 or the Canon Log 3. I always shoot Canon Log 2. No matter what I'm doing, that's just a personal preference. That's what I always do. Now, in my last video, I didn't mention this because I wanted to save it for this video. And here is the icing on the top for me anyway, because I use Final Cut Pro. And Final Cut Pro basically has this exact color profile built right into Final Cut Pro. So I know whenever I'm shooting C-Log 2 and I look at the LCD screen, this is exactly what it's going to look like when I put it on Final Cut Pro. So if you go into that C-Log 2 and you go to edit file, I've chosen Canon Log 2 C Gamut because that is the exact picture profile that Final Cut Pro puts right inside Final Cut Pro. So when I choose that and I'm shooting with the C-Log 2 here and I go to color grade with that and I just slap it on, that's exactly what I'm getting. So that's why I've done that. So moving on to the fifth tab, and this one is the custom white balance. And if you go inside here, there's one thing that I basically change all the time. The white balance, obviously I just keep it, I never put it on auto white balance. I leave it on like the Kelvin temperature so that way I can control whether it's warm or, blue. Depending on what I'm shooting, I'll kind of mess around with that. But going into the white balance correction, I'll actually choose this to fit my Canon C70 perfectly because I find my Canon C70 shoots a little bit warmer. So I've went in here and I kind of matched that with my C70. Now, if you don't have C70s, I would recommend you just leave this right in the center and not mess around with this. Now, pre-recording is very helpful. If you turn it on, you'll go down to either 3 seconds or 5 seconds. I have it on 5 seconds. So that way, when I press record, it was already recording 5 seconds before I pressed the button. And that is very helpful. Keep in mind that when you do have this on, if you try to shoot open gate or something like that, I'm pretty sure you can't shoot open gate. And moving on to the next tab, the tally lamp is basically the red record button on the camera. So when you're recording, you can, let's say if you're far away and you can't really see the LCD screen, but sometimes you can see on the actual camera whether or not the red light is there. That's obviously what that is the tally light. Now this next one is very important if you want to get a preview of how your image will look while you're recording. Whatever you're recording, weddings, YouTube videos, whatever it is. This is the View Log Assist. So like the Rec 709, you're gonna be able to see what it looks like, what your picture will look like while you're recording and not look at a log image while you're recording. So this is very helpful. The last two, false colors and zebras, I leave off because I have them again on function buttons on the camera, and we're gonna go over that in a bit. This next tab is actually really important to me because the shooting info display is a really, really good one. So going into the shooting info display, if you go down, you'll be able to see the grid lines. You can turn on the grid lines if you want. I don't have that on because of this reason right here in a second, but going out, I have the grid display turned off. Going down to brightness info, I have mine set to the wave monitoring, not the histogram. I have the wave monitoring on because once you go down to the wave settings, I have mine not on line, but I have it on RGB. So when you go out of this menu, if you press on the info button and you go through the cycle of that, you can keep pressing that and you'll see that the RGB is right there and you'll be able to see whether or not you're clipping because that's what the line does anyway. It tells you whether you're clipping. Also, the RGB tells you whether you're clipping, but it also gives you an idea whether you're too warm or you're too cool. And that's why I have it on the RGB. That's my personal preference. Now, when you go down into this same tab down to aspect marker, I have on the 916 because again, that's gonna give me the equivalent to what it will look like in vertical. Again, I don't really do this very often because if I'm going to shoot vertical, I'll just shoot vertical. However, there are times when I do want to crop in and those lines there are just a nice little reminder that, hey, this is what the final, video is going to look like. So stay within these lines. So if you're going to shoot a lot of content with open gate, you're going to want those lines on to let you know this is what it's going to look like on social media. So guys, I put a lot of time into this video. If you could help me out and give me a like, that would be very, very appreciated. We're going to go into the last tab here now. Now the last tab in the red menu is the auto power off temperature. If you go to high, the camera will say, keep in mind, your card's going to get like extra hot here because you're essentially bypassing and ignoring their safety, like turn the camera off because the cards are getting too hot and we don't want your cards to like blow up. Not going to blow up, but it's, you know what I mean? They don't want them to overheat. So if you go ahead and turn that on high, you'll get a longer shoot time. But again, you don't really need that for this because, the Canon R6 V has a built-in fan and it basically never overheats. Everything else for the last tab there, I leave on the factory settings. Moving along to the AF, the pink menu, and this one's going to be a really quick one because this is pretty self-explanatory. Movie servo AF, I leave that on enabled. Obviously in the AF area, I leave it on basically the whole area. So that way I can touch on the screen anywhere and it will focus on whatever I want it to focus on. Moving along to the next tab here, the subject detection, I leave it on people. And the eye detection, I'll leave it on auto because this camera is very snappy and it will grab onto whoever you touch on the screen with. It's really good and it grabs on to whoever you want it to. One of the things that I love about this camera is the register people priority. For an example, if I go to a wedding and let's say there's a bride and a groom and I really want the camera to focus on that bride, I could actually put a picture in this camera of the bride and the camera will prioritize her and not hunt from different people, which can act. Going down to the bottom where it says subject switching sensitivity, I have this on 2. I don't have it on 3, 4, or 5, which is high. I have mine set on 2. That's just a personal preference that I have it on. I don't like it when it's extremely quick. I like a little bit more of a soft, kind of gentle focusing from me to her or whatever. Moving on to the next tab and the bottom one, the movie servo AF speed, I have that on to 6. That's again, just a personal preference. Moving on to the next tab, I just leave that how it is. Moving on to the next tab, I leave that how it is as well. And then the final tab, the peaking settings right there, I have that set to a custom function button. Let's move on to the next menu. Now the blue and purple menu, I actually leave those on the factory settings, so I don't touch those at all. But just to give you a little bit of rundown on what they do, the purple setting is actually more for like if you want to connect your phone or connect the camera to, you know, a hotspot, Bluetooth, that thing, not a hotspot, but a Bluetooth. You can go ahead and do that. Let's say you take some photos or a video and you want to put it on your phone right away. You can take that from the camera. But going right over to the wrench settings, which is the yellow settings, and the very first tab, this is an important one, and that's the first one, the record function. Now, what I've told you is I scroll all the way down and where you see the movie, not the camera, because the camera is the picture, and the movie one is the video, and we're talking about video here. We're not talking about photo. I always leave it on record to multiple cards, like SD cards, to the SD card and the CF Express card. So if you scroll all the way down, the first one obviously is standard, and you can scroll all the way down, and I choose always choose 2 of the cards at the exact same time. And the rest in this tab, I basically leave just at the factory setting of how the camera came. But if you want to know how to erase everything, so keep that in mind, if you go down to the format SD card and CF Express card, this is basically erasing everything on those cards. So make sure you back it up or save it or port it to your computer before you go ahead and do that. Onto the second tab on the wrench settings, I leave this at the factory setting as well. Obviously, when you first get your camera, you'll need to set the date and the time in your language, and that for me is English, and I just set the camera how it is. And the third tab, I leave this at the factory resetting as well. The beep enabled. I like the volume. I like to play back the sounds of the camera and what the sounds make. Just a personal preference again. Now onto the fourth tab in the wrench settings, and you can see the screen brightness right there. When I'm outside in direct sunlight, I will put this at 7 so it helps me see the LCD screen, because this thing is pretty dim. I don't touch the screen color tone. I leave that on standard because I don't want it to mess around with the image while I'm out on the field. And the last 2 in the fourth tab, I just leave those at the factory settings. On to the fifth tab. And in the fifth tab, we have the cooling fan settings. I will always leave the fan settings on auto, medium. I'm pretty confident that that is the factory setting that it comes with. Going out, you have the sensor cleaning right there. I have mine on the when you turn the camera off, the sensor will clean. It will clean itself. That's what I have mine on. Going down to the power saving mode, I personally have mine at these. So when you get this camera out of the box right away, the screen dimmer actually starts dimming after 5 seconds, which is really annoying. And I covered this in the last video, but I've went ahead and disabled that, and I turned it completely off. And the screen off mode, I've disabled that as well. I have mine on the auto power off, and I've turned that on to the 5-minute mark or the 10-minute mark, depending on what I'm doing. But most of the time, it's the 5-minute mark. On to the next tab, you have camera reset. You don't want to do that, because if you do that, everything we talked about, you reset the whole thing. Moving on. And the last one in the wrench settings, I leave that all basically factory settings. I mean, it's just a battery info, show log. It's all the firmware, how to update your camera. When Canon comes out with a firmware for this camera, you can go ahead and, update that if you want to do that. Now onto the fun part of this video. This is my favorite part about this camera, and that is the custom function buttons. And we're pretty much almost done. So if you go to the first tab there where it says custom buttons for shooting, now over to the left, you'll see the photo side. We don't want the photo side. It's over to the right. And when you go over to the right, you'll also see on the left side there where it will show the camera, obviously. And I personally, what I have mine set to is the number 1 I have set to false color. And I do believe I have number 6 set to false color. And the reason why for that is because sometimes, depending on what I'm doing, if I'm shooting vertical, I'm looking at a gimbal and 6 is right there and I can see that easily. And then sometimes when I'm shooting horizontal, the 1 is a lot easier for me to see. I love using false color. It's probably the one thing that I use more than anything on my camera, because I hate blown out highlights. Now, number 2 on my camera, I actually have set to off, because I don't want to accidentally touch my camera and it does something. So some of these custom function buttons I actually have set to off. Now, number 3, I have set to the Kelvin temperature, like I was saying earlier. Once you press that twice, you have to press it once, and then again, you'll see the Kelvin temperature. You can use the scroll wheel, or you can just touch the screen to choose what kind of Kelvin temperature you want. You want it warm or cold. And I use that number 3 all the time for Kelvin temperature. Number 4, as a custom button, I have that one turned off. Again, I don't want to press anything accidentally, and it just messes up my camera while I'm mid-shooting. Number 5, I had set to peaking because there's times when I'm in bright sunny conditions and I can't really see the LCD screen. But if I press on number 5, I'll be able to see the peaking to see if the person is, I think it's the colors. You can change the colors actually to, again, scrolling down to number 6, I already said this, but I have that set to false color. So that's pretty much all I have the custom buttons set to is the false color, the white balance, and the focus peaking. That's, again, what I personally like to use on my camera the most. So that's what I have it set to. All right, guys, that's it for today's video. And if you made it this far in today's video, go down and put in the comments Adam One Shot Films and tell me your favorite part about this camera in today's video. I would love to hear from you. And if you want other content to be made on this channel, go ahead, drop me some ideas, and I'll make something on whatever you want me to make it on. Until then, I'll see you in the next video. Take care.